Do you remember walking into a crowded church hall or family gathering and catching the smell of homemade snacks before you even saw the table? Maybe it was the buttery aroma of fresh Chex Mix, the sweet scent of ambrosia salad, or the sight of a cheese ball sitting proudly in the center of a tray. Those foods weren't just recipes, they were part of birthdays, holidays, reunions, and afternoons spent with people who mattered most. Today, many of those beloved homemade snacks have quietly disappeared. So grab a plate and come along, because we're about to take a delicious trip back to the 1970s. There was a time when nearly every family had a signature snack sitting somewhere in the kitchen, ready for company, holidays, or unexpected visitors. These recipes weren't bought from a store shelf or ordered through an app. They were made by hand, shared across generations, and remembered long after the plates were cleared. Today, many of them have quietly disappeared. But before they faded away completely, they became familiar parts of daily life for many Americans who still remember them fondly today. Some of the most beloved snacks of the decade are coming up, including one that seemed to appear at nearly every gathering from coast to coast. Homemade Chex Mix. Few homemade snacks captured the spirit of a 1970s gathering quite like homemade Chex Mix. Long before store shelves were filled with endless packaged versions, families made their own in large roasting pans, often preparing enough to feed an entire neighborhood. The smell of butter, Worcestershire sauce, and seasonings drifting through the kitchen was often the first sign that guests would soon be arriving. Every family seemed to have a slightly different recipe, and many insisted theirs was the best. Children often sneaked handfuls while it cooled, while adults filled small bowls before card games, football parties, or holiday visits. Today it still exists, but the homemade ritual that surrounded it has largely faded away. Cheese ball. For many Americans, no party table felt complete without a cheese ball sitting proudly in the center. Covered with chopped nuts and surrounded by crackers, it was often one of the first things guests noticed when they walked into a room. What made it special wasn't just the flavor, it was the effort behind it. Someone had mixed it, shaped it by hand, chilled it, and carefully presented it for company. Different households had their own versions, adding everything from dried beef to green onions. During holidays and family gatherings, the cheese ball became more than a snack. It was a symbol that guests were welcome and expected. Today, it's less common than it once was, though it still appears at many holiday gatherings. Deviled eggs. Deviled eggs were one of those dishes that always seemed to disappear faster than anyone expected. They appeared at church socials, family reunions, graduation parties, and holiday dinners throughout the 1970s. Carefully arranged on special serving trays, they looked almost too neat to eat. Yet within minutes, half the platter could be gone. Every cook had a secret touch. Some added extra mustard, others preferred sweet relish or paprika. What people remember most isn't necessarily the recipe itself, but the familiar sight of a relative carrying a tray through the front door. Deviled eggs represented reliability. No matter what kind of gathering it was, they were almost guaranteed to be there. Pigs in a blanket. Few snacks generated excitement among children quite like pigs in a blanket. The moment a warm tray emerged from the oven, kids seemed to appear from every corner of the house. Their appeal was simple: small sausages wrapped in dough and baked until golden brown. They weren't fancy, and they weren't intended to impress anyone. Instead, they delivered something even more valuable: comfort. They worked equally well at birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and casual weekend visits from neighbors. Adults enjoyed them just as much as children, often reaching for seconds without hesitation. Today they still exist, but they remain popular, though they're no longer as central to home entertaining as they once were. Stuffed celery. Stuffed celery reflected a side of 1970s entertaining that younger generations sometimes find surprising. Hosts took simple ingredients and transformed them into something that felt special. Celery sticks were filled with cream cheese, pimento cheese, peanut butter, or other family favorites, then carefully arranged on serving trays. They added color, crunch, and variety to party spreads already packed with homemade dishes. While the recipe itself was simple, it represented an era when people routinely prepared food from scratch for guests. There was pride in presentation and satisfaction in making something yourself. Today, stuffed celery is far less common today, though it still appears in some family traditions. But for many Americans, seeing it instantly brings back images of family gatherings and holiday tables. The party table may have been where many homemade snacks first caught our attention, but nowhere did creativity run wilder than the community potluck. And some of the dishes that dominated those gatherings would seem almost unbelievable to younger Americans today. Watergate salad. Few dishes capture the unique personality of 1970s potluck culture quite like Watergate salad. With its pale green color, crushed pineapple, marshmallows, whipped topping, and pistachio pudding mix, it looked unlike almost anything served today. Yet during the decade, it was a familiar sight at church suppers, family reunions, and holiday buffets across America. Part of its appeal was how easy it was to make, but another part was simply how fun it felt. Children loved its sweetness, while adults appreciated that it could feed a crowd without much expense. Looking back, Watergate salad reflects a time when convenience ingredients were embraced with enthusiasm and creativity. Today, many younger Americans have never even heard of it. Ambrosia salad. Long before elaborate dessert tables became common, ambrosia salad often served as both a side dish and a sweet treat. Combining fruit, coconut, marshmallows, and whipped topping, it brought color and brightness to nearly every special occasion. Many families had recipes passed down from previous generations, but the version popular during the 1970s became especially associated with holidays and large gatherings. What people remember most is the anticipation of seeing that familiar bowl appear among the other dishes. It felt festive before anyone even took a bite. In an era when recipes were frequently shared between neighbors and relatives, ambrosia became one of those dishes that connected generations. Today, it's seen less often, usually during holidays and family gatherings. Jell-O salad molds. If there was one food category that truly defined the visual style of 1970s potlucks, it was the Jell-O salad mold. These colorful creations appeared in countless shapes, sizes, and flavors, often displayed proudly at the center of the table. Some contained fruit, others vegetables, and a few included ingredients that seemed surprising by modern standards. Creating the perfect mold required patience, planning, and sometimes a little luck. When it released cleanly from the pan, hosts felt a genuine sense of accomplishment. Younger generations may joke about these recipes today, but at the time they represented creativity and hospitality. More importantly, they reflected a culture where homemade presentation mattered. Every successful Jell-O mold told guests that someone had invested time and effort into making the gathering feel special. Grape jelly meatballs. At first glance, the combination sounds unusual. Yet grape jelly meatballs became one of the most beloved party foods of the decade. The recipe combined meatballs with a sweet and tangy sauce, often made from grape jelly and chili sauce, creating a flavor that was surprisingly addictive. Served from slow cookers at potlucks and family gatherings, they encouraged people to linger near the buffet table and come back for just one more bite. Their popularity reflected an era when home cooks weren't afraid to experiment with unexpected ingredient combinations. What seems unusual today felt perfectly normal in many American kitchens. Even decades later, many people instantly recognized the recipe because it appeared at so many community events throughout their childhood and adulthood. Party rye pizzas. Before frozen appetizers became commonplace, party rye pizzas offered a simple homemade solution for feeding a crowd. Built on small slices of rye bread and topped with seasoned meat, cheese, and sauce, they delivered the flavors of pizza in bite-sized form. They were easy to prepare in large quantities, making them ideal for holiday parties, game nights, and neighborhood gatherings. Hosts could pull tray after tray from the oven while guests continued eating and socializing. For many families, these little snacks became a tradition repeated year after year. What made them memorable wasn't culinary sophistication but familiarity. They represented the practical creativity that defined so much of 1970s home entertaining. Today, they're rarely seen, but those who remember them often do so with a smile. Potluck dishes brought entire communities together, but some of the most cherished snack memories happened much closer to home. They appeared after school, during holidays, and on special afternoons in the kitchen. And for many Americans, those memories remain the sweetest of all. Ants on a log. Few snacks are more closely tied to childhood memories than ants on a log. The recipe was wonderfully simple: celery sticks filled with peanut butter and topped with a row of raisins. Yet for countless children growing up during the 1970s, it felt far more exciting than its ingredients would suggest. Parents appreciated that it was inexpensive, quick to prepare, and required no cooking. Children loved the playful name and the chance to help assemble it themselves. It often appeared after school, providing a small burst of energy before homework, chores, or an evening spent outdoors. Looking back, Ants on a Log represents a time when snacks were less about flashy packaging and more about simple moments shared in the kitchen. Today, many children have never experienced that ritual. Rice Krispie Treats. Long before gourmet desserts and bakery-style snack bars became common, Rice Krispie Treats held a special place in American homes. Made with cereal, butter, and melted marshmallows, they were easy enough for children to help prepare, which made them even more memorable. Many people can still remember standing beside a parent or grandparent, watching marshmallows slowly melt on the stove while eagerly waiting for the mixture to cool. These treats appeared everywhere, from school bake sales and birthday parties to family movie nights. Their popularity wasn't based on complexity. In fact, the opposite was true. They succeeded because they transformed a handful of ordinary ingredients into something that felt magical. For many Americans, one bite still brings back memories of kitchens filled with laughter and sticky fingers. Popcorn balls. For generations of American families, popcorn balls signaled that a holiday or special occasion was approaching. During the 1970s, they remained a beloved homemade tradition, especially around Halloween and Christmas. Families gathered in the kitchen to mix popcorn with sweet syrup before shaping the warm mixture by hand into round balls. The process could be messy, but that was part of the fun. Children often wanted to help, even when their creations came out uneven or misshapen. More than the finished snack itself, people remember the experience of making them together. Popcorn balls reflected an era when preparing treats was often a family activity rather than a purchase. Today, they have become increasingly rare, replaced by packaged alternatives that offer convenience but not the same sense of participation. Homemade fudge. Homemade fudge occupied a special category all its own. It wasn't an everyday snack, but something associated with holidays, family visits, and occasions that felt important. Making it required patience and attention, which meant successful batches earned genuine admiration. Many families had recipes carefully preserved on index cards, stained from years of use. During Christmas, especially, tins of homemade fudge often appeared as gifts for neighbors, relatives, and friends. The rich flavor was certainly part of its appeal, but the deeper significance came from the effort involved. Giving someone homemade fudge meant giving them a portion of your time and care. In today's world of instant purchases and overnight deliveries, that idea feels increasingly uncommon. Yet for many Americans, the memory of homemade fudge remains inseparable from some of their happiest holiday experiences. Divinity candy was one of those recipes that seemed almost magical when it turned out correctly and deeply frustrating when it didn't. Made from sugar, egg whites, and careful timing, it demanded a level of patience that many modern cooks rarely encounter. Throughout the 1970s, it remained a treasured holiday tradition in countless households. Family members often watched closely as parents or grandparents worked through the delicate process, knowing that weather and humidity could affect the final result. When successful, the candy emerged light, airy, and almost cloud-like. Because it required skill and experience, Divinity carried a sense of accomplishment that store-bought treats could never replicate. Today, fewer people make it, but those who remember it often associate the candy with family kitchens, holiday preparations, and cherished traditions passed from one generation to the next. The snacks we've covered so far were often tied to childhood, holidays, and community gatherings. But there was another side of homemade food culture in the 1970s, recipes that reflected skill, patience, and traditions passed quietly from one kitchen to another. Cheese fondue. For a brief but memorable period during the 1970s, cheese fondue became one of the most fashionable ways to entertain at home. Families and friends gathered around a communal pot of melted cheese, dipping bread, vegetables, and other bite-sized foods into the warm mixture. The experience was about far more than eating. It encouraged conversation, laughter, and lingering at the table long after the meal might otherwise have ended. In many homes, bringing out the fondue pot instantly transformed an ordinary evening into a special occasion. The ritual felt modern and sophisticated at the time, yet it was also remarkably simple. Today, fondue nights are far less common, but many Americans still remember the novelty and excitement of sharing food from a single bubbling pot. Cheese straws. Cheese straws were a staple of countless family gatherings, holiday parties, and afternoon visits. Crisp, buttery, and packed with sharp cheese flavor, they were often prepared from recipes that had been handed down through multiple generations. Unlike many snacks that arrived in colorful packaging, cheese straws required time and effort. Dough had to be mixed, shaped, and baked with care. The result was a homemade treat that felt both elegant and comforting at the same time. In many households, large batches were prepared during the holiday season and shared with guests throughout the weeks that followed. While they still exist in some regions, especially in the South, the tradition of making them from scratch has become far less common than it once was. Date nut bread. Date nut bread belonged to a category of homemade foods that reflected patience and practicality. Made with chopped dates and nuts, it was often baked in advance and served in thin slices alongside coffee, tea, or holiday meals. The recipe made good use of ingredients that stored well and could feed a large number of people without great expense. For many families, it became a regular feature of Christmas gatherings and winter celebrations. What stands out today is how unhurried the process felt. Baking wasn't treated as a chore to complete as quickly as possible. It was simply part of preparing for family and guests. As lifestyles became busier, recipes like date nut bread slowly faded from everyday use. Cheese Dreams. Despite the whimsical name, Cheese Dreams had already been around for decades by the 1970s, but many families still served them as a simple after-school snack or light meals. Typically made by spreading cheese on bread and toasting it until golden and bubbly, they offered a warm and satisfying treat that could be prepared with ingredients already on hand. Children often enjoyed them after school, while adults served them alongside soups, salads, or casual gatherings with friends. Their appeal came from their simplicity. There was no complicated recipe and no special equipment required. Yet somehow they managed to feel comforting every time. Today, many people who grew up eating Cheese Dreams are surprised to discover that younger generations have never even heard the name. Pimento cheese spread. Pimento cheese spread was much more than a simple appetizer. In many households, it was a refrigerator staple that could be transformed into sandwiches, crackers, celery snacks, or party trays at a moment's notice. Made from cheese, mayonnaise, and pimentos, it represented the practical creativity that defined so much of home cooking during the era. Every family seemed to have its own preferred version, and discussions about the right recipe could become surprisingly passionate. It was especially common in the South, but its popularity extended far beyond one region. Looking back, pimento cheese spread symbolizes a time when homemade basics formed the foundation of everyday meals and entertaining. It remains beloved by many, yet the homemade versions that once filled family kitchens are increasingly uncommon. Looking back at these forgotten snacks, it's easy to see that they were never just about food. They were about family gatherings, neighborhood friendships, holiday traditions, and the simple pleasure of making something with your own hands. We'd love to hear from you. Which of these snacks brings back the strongest memory? Share your story in the comments, and until next time, thank you for joining us on another trip back to yesterday.